Hi, and welcome to Filmmakers Compass Podcast, the show where we discuss movies and, well, more movies. I'm D-Man, joined by CP. CP, how are you doing today?
Dude, I'm fantastic. It's October. I'm loving all the Halloween scary movies, and I'm sure you are too.
I actually, after our episode last week, I went ahead and put on Stranger Things Season 1, and it is as good as I remember. Love
Nice.
Stranger Things. And I'll probably definitely get all the way up to the trick-or-treating scene from Season 2. So looking forward to
Nice.
watching the rest of that. And then a bunch of the other movies from our list last week. I haven't gotten to all of them yet, but, we're about a third of the way through October. So plenty of time to keep watching movies. So Halloween movies. And hopefully, we can get in most of the ones from those lists. But more importantly, we actually got a ton of comments regarding Halloween movies and what everybody likes. So we got to thank you all so much for,
Yay.
sending us your lists. We are going to read a few of them now because they were not all the movies that we named. So we really appreciate you guys chiming in and sending us some additional movies. So first up, I'll do one and then throw it over to you, CP. But first up is SD Photo and Video, top 5 Halloween movies. Beetlejuice, Hocus Pocus, Orson Welles' War of the Worlds, Silence of the Lambs, which is, a classic horror film, and any Alfred Hitchcock movie. So great list there. I'm a little surprised, we didn't get any Hitchcock in our list. So that's a great mention right there, I think.
Yeah, and War of the Worlds is kind of an out there one too. That's not one I ever think of on Halloween, so I'll have to consider that. So first person I'm going to give a shout out to is actually on Twitter, and it's Bear Down Chicago Bears. He reached out to us with Halloween, Nightmare on Elm Street, Scream, Friday the 13th, and Blair Witch Project. And those are pretty much just all the best scary movies you could possibly ever watch. So, you get like 2 thumbs up for that one. Good job, man.
Yeah, great list. Here's one. These are some more movies that we didn't name. This is on Instagram, but they said Casper, Hotel Transylvania, the first one. It's The Great Pumpkin, which I did list, Hocus Pocus, and then The Nightmare Before Christmas, which we did kind of hint at, where does that fall? And I guess for this person, it's Halloween. So great list.
Fair
Next
enough.
up is Caitlin Skog, Halloween, The Exorcist, Carrie, Hocus Pocus, and Jeepers Creepers. So we're getting a little horror vibe going here.
I'm
I think
surprised she didn't list the Babadook because I know that's her like favorite scary movie.
When's the last time you saw Jeepers Creepers?
It's been a while, but Jeepers Creepers 2 is one of the worst scary movies ever made.
Jeepers Creepers 1 was pretty creepy. So next up is Mike Soto, who chimed in, said Nightmare on Elm Street. So agreed with you there. Charlie Brown, Halloween, agreed with me. Children of the Corn and Friday the 13th, and then Monster Squad. So CP,
boom, back
nailed
with me.
it. Mike Soto, you got a good list, man.
I approve.
Send it over to you if you want to go.
Then my brother hit us up and he said Halloween Town, Young Frankenstein, Hocus Pocus, Halloween, and Friday the 13th. And that's actually a pretty good mashup of both our lists.
Yeah, Young Frankenstein, though. That actually, yeah, now that you say that out loud, that might be worthy of putting on. And speaking of Young Frankenstein, I mean, this just came to me. Did you watch the new Munsters movie?
I did not.
I did not either. So I've heard it's like incredibly colorful, very Halloween vibe, but maybe that's something worth checking out.
Maybe I haven't seen that. Have it to list for the new watches.
Keep us going.
I believe I have Derek Becker. D Beck reached out to us and he was cool enough to suggest Rocky Horror Picture Show, the OG Hocus Pocus. He was very clear to point out not Hocus Pocus 2. He mentioned Halloween Town, Van Helsing, and also Young Frankenstein.
Van Helsing's good. Halloween Town, that's a Disney Channel original movie, correct?
Halloween Town?
Yeah.
Yes.
That's the one that just has like it looks like a Disney Channel original movie, and yet somehow it's just got that little bit of charm that just makes it work.
Yeah.
So Go ahead. Keep us going.
Asami hit us up, and she didn't know what I meant when I asked for 5. She only gave us 3. She said Beetlejuice, Hocus
Instant.
Pocus. Well, actually, I lied. She only gave me 2, and then she said, apparently, I don't really watch that many movies. So
Ooh,
I
we got to
replied
change
with,
that.
"We can't be friends." So she probably won't tell me the rest of her list after that.
All right. And were there any further lists?
Not that I wanted to bring up. I thought that was kind of a good mix. I did also want to give a shout out to Aaron Matthews Barnett, and he reached out to us and he screenshot it and he said, listening to the podcast for the first time, totally love it, guys. Keep up the good work. So thank you for listening in.
Yeah, thank you. And then finally, I do have one last shout out for Jasmine Nunez on YouTube. Said 18 episodes left before I'm completely caught up with FCP. You guys are so rad. It's been a fun ride listening to you both. I have so much to learn about filmmaking and so many movies to watch since I started binging FCP about a week ago. I talk about it a lot. I actually think at this point I need some merch, which we've never discussed merch. So that I'm sorry at this, maybe that's something we'll have to discuss in the future. At least a sticker for my hydro flask. So also, and here we go. Christian is right. Jack Holly and Harry Potter is kind of lame sauce. LOL.
Wow.
So, yeah, somebody agreeing with Christian. That's new.
I like to hear that I'm right. Not something we get on this show very often.
All right. Well done, CP.
Yeah, wow. Came through in the clutch, apparently. Got one person in there that agrees with me on something.
Awesome. Well, I got to say thank you all so much for chiming in with your lists and keeping the conversations going. This week's feedback and comments were absolutely fantastic. So thank you all, and glad we could share some of the lists on the show this week. So we'll go ahead and move into our first segment this week. CP, I'm going to throw it over to you.
So obviously this is Halloween time. This is where we talk scary, scary stuff. And I read a really scary article in the news that I wanted to share with you in the Hollywood Reporter. And they are remaking what I consider a classic, the original American Pie. It's not even 25 years old. In fact, the franchise...
When did that come out? 99?
99. The franchise has been releasing, kind of the B tier movies pretty consistently. I think they had one come out like a year ago.
Like the National Lampoons.
Yeah. And Universal has said, you know what? It's been long enough. We've got enough content. We got some fresh ideas. We're going to reboot the whole franchise. Apparently, none of the original cast in any way is supposed to be involved. This is not like Son of Stifler or anything like that. It's a fresh new take. They have a screenwriter, a female screenwriter and director attached who is supposed to reinvent the series. And I kind of wanted your take on it because, well, I'll tell you mine.
Well, what actually comes to mind is, how politically correct, I guess, the version in 1999, would play today. I'm guessing, the concept of, making a pact to try to get laid for the sake of getting laid probably doesn't play as well in 2022 as it did in 99, as well as the act of she was not actively participating in the webcam scene where they were filming her without her knowing. I imagine that did not age all that well. So in terms of, doing like a reboot, I mean, if you want to revive the brand, that's kind of cool. And maybe it does need a slight update for 2022 audiences because, sensibilities and the, kind of hyper wokeness of today's youth might not enjoy the 99 version the way it was received at that time.
Well, I think that's part of it. It's obviously a movie out of time for what's considered acceptable these days. But I think what's so amazing about the American Pie films is it's really a time capsule to what life was like for teenagers back in the late 90s, early 2000s. And I think that the franchise always captured that very well. And it's not just in terms of the plot points, but it's the music, it's the way people talk, it's the way people dress. Like it's as close as you can kind of get to going back to 1990s, early 2000s.
No, and I mean, I loved the movie at the time. It's still hilarious. I grew up not in that age, I guess that was geared more towards high school kids. I think we were middle school kids when
Mm-hmm.
American Pie
Mm-hmm.
came out. But, that was a movie that we grew up on as we went into high school. And, I don't know. To me, I still think the movie's, very entertaining, hilarious. Stifler, is crazy. There's a lot of elements that I think work. It's just weird because it's like, would today's youth, the people who would be targeted for that demographic of that movie. So unless you're playing it for like nostalgic purposes or time capsule purposes, would a new generation find that movie as funny as we did in '99? I don't think so.
I don't think so either. And that's also kind of why I'm wondering why Universal wants to go back to it. Part of it is I don't think that this has the brand power to warrant continuing with the franchise. I mean, kind of like the American Pie Presents movies or the straight to DVD, straight to digital, and they were never
Yeah.
particularly successful. They kind of tried to do the same thing with Van Wilder. It's like, great, the first Van Wilder was a hit, but all the other ones, it's like, I don't know why you're trying to reinvent a franchise here. It almost seems like you're better off just making a raunchy teen comedy for this generation, something kind of like what they did with Booksmart or, Good Boys, where it's more in
Yeah.
line with the humor of today's teen generation. It's woker, it's more aware of what it is. And again, those movies were financially successful. They didn't tap into any sort of existing brand. They were just coming of age comedies. They got some notable comedians to be in it, and it was successful. I don't know why they are so insistent on revitalizing a brand that I think is good as it was already made.
And can we also acknowledge that I do not think for a second that teenagers are any less raunchy today than at any point in like history. I think they're just a little bit more aware that there's a lot of cameras rolling, that what they say, might be heard by more than just the people in that room, and they're just kind of aware to that. But I mean, if you've been around teenagers like at the movies, I don't have kids, but like I'm guessing they are just as raunchy and crazy as ever.
I
I
mean, I
don't think
would
that
think so.
I don't think that really changed. I think now you just there's a lot more tech out there and you can say what you think and it gets blasted out on TikTok or something, where back in the day it might have just been to your classroom, it's just
Mm-hmm.
different
Mm-hmm.
times, but I don't think people necessarily are any less raunchy. I think raunchy teen comedies still have their place.
Yeah, totally agree. And not really sure what Universal's doing. I mean, give us your thoughts. Obviously, they haven't really released a lot about it other than the fact that they are developing it. So maybe they'll get this right. I'm not particularly optimistic because it doesn't seem like the type of thing they're going to get right. It's actually funny. I went to a tangent. I met Warren Zeed, who was the producer of the film a couple
Okay.
years back, and he was talking about the process of creating at the time this very famous raunchy teen comedy. And the big thing that he pointed to was he said, we kind of just got a young writer and we said, listen, go out there and write the most high school story, take everything you remember and make it as funny as you can. And we'll cut it together later and see how we can make it work as a movie. And that's kind of what happened. And it was really sort of amazing because they got this movie that I think a lot of people at the time appreciated because it captured certain essences of high school life that the coming of age movies that everybody remembers that do them well capture so vividly.
I mean, can we just acknowledge how great the dad is too?
Oh my gosh. He pretty much makes the movie hilarious.
When he
Eugene
dances.
Levy, oh my gosh, stole the show. Stole the show.
So funny. All right. Well, let's go ahead and move on to our next topic.
Another exciting piece of news this last week, the trailer for this movie dropped, Mario Brothers. It's coming out in April, and the internet has a lot of thoughts. Have you seen the trailer, D-Man?
I have indeed seen the trailer. I have also seen across YouTube, Instagram, TikTok, tons of reaction videos to the trailer, which obviously the biggest thing being and biggest concern going into the movie and the trailer was the voice of Mario, who is being voiced by Chris Pratt. So, ironically, everybody is a little bit, hesitant about whether or not he'll be able to nail Mario. Mostly, I think, because the voice actor who does Mario in the games is actually, I mean, I think he's a voice actor in the movie, just not Mario.
That's so weird. Why not just, I mean, we've had the Mario voice. We know it well. It's very distinct. He's this little Italian guy, or that's how his voice comes through. And it's beloved, and it's been in the games for 30 years. Why not just stick with what we know as opposed to trying to make, Chris Pratt sound like this guy? Because he doesn't really do it to me.
Well, first of all, we have to acknowledge that Super Mario Brothers, or Mario Brothers, there was a live action movie in the 90s.
And oh my gosh, 1993. And I think we've all tried to forget it.
Yeah, I mean, it's pretty bad. It's one of those movies that, like, maybe it's kind of fun to revisit once in a while, but it's
I don't
not
know
even
that it is.
it's
I
not
really
even
don't.
so bad that it's good. Like, it reminds me of, do you remember that movie like Theodore Rex with like Whoopi Goldberg, where she's
Yeah.
like her partner, her, her cop partner is a dinosaur? I mean, it sounds stupid saying it out loud, but that was a real 90s movie. I mean, that was kind of fun. I don't know why, but like if I went back and watched that again, I might enjoy it a little bit. So maybe I have to revisit the live action Super Mario Brothers. But I mean, we haven't seen the movie yet, but I mean, visually, I think we can at least acknowledge that this is going to look much better. And obviously, it looks kind of like, of a movie version of a video game. You know, it is
Yeah.
a
It's in
digitally
with
animated version.
the visual style that we expect from the Mario games. The other major issue I had was with Bowser's voice, because he just didn't seem gravelly enough and deep enough and powerful enough to
He's
be
normally really
Bowser.
raspy. Raw.
Yeah, and the same thing. And I'm like, obviously, we've had voice actors playing Bowser for, you know, since the beginning. Why don't we just get it right?
So is the problem then when we talk about voice actors in this case that Mario's voice is so iconic that it's almost jarring when it's not the guy that does the voice in the video games? Because, something like Sonic the Hedgehog, he never really talks in the video games, and I don't know what he would sound like. I don't know if in the movie that's exactly how I always pictured him sounding if he did talk, but we were kind of okay with it. Like nobody really said boo. But with Mario, everybody's all up in arms. Now, granted, I know there's a small segment of people online who tend to not like Chris Pratt for whatever reason. So, I mean, there's a little bit of baggage there, but that doesn't bother me at all. I love Parks and Rec. I like the first Jurassic World. Like, I'm down for, Guardians of the Galaxy, even though we'll get into that different time. But, like, I think Chris Pratt is great. So I'm not holding anything against, hey, him coming into the movie and doing his take on Mario. It was a little jarring, just the accent for me, I think. I don't know that his voice itself killed Mario for me or anything. It was more so he was doing an Italian accent. And I was like, I don't know.
Yeah, it just
Is that gonna make it for a whole movie? I don't know.
I think it's just, for me, it's just the fact that we know what this character is supposed to sound like. He has very iconic, phrases and lines, and he's been in so many games beyond just Mario games, right? I mean, he's appeared in a whole slew of other Nintendo properties: Super Smash, Mario and Sonic at the Olympic Games, right? Mario Tennis. Like, he's a well-known character, and we know what he's supposed to sound like. And so for me, the fact that the only two major characters they showed in the trailer, Mario and Bowser, just didn't quite get it
Well,
right.
and technically Toad, right?
Yeah, true. There is
For a
Toad.
second. But yeah, I don't know. To me, I'm still willing to give this movie a shot. The trailer didn't kill it for me. I know some people, they're already doing, like I saw on social media, people have already done AI recreations of the video game Mario voice. People have already been, kind of demanding that the voice actor do his own take on the trailer. just so we could see what it would be like, which would be kind of fun.
I mean,
I
it
don't
would
know.
be fun, right?
I don't know why Nintendo wouldn't want that, but you know, no, the trailer, I still think it looks
Especially
kind of cool.
since for something like this, the draw is the character of Mario. I don't think you need to worry about, shrouding the movie in quote unquote star power. Like Mario fans would have gone to see a Mario movie no matter who did the voice, as long as it was slightly close. So I guess that's the thing. I'm just wondering, like, there are people that are going to watch it because they love this guy and have seen him in, dozens of their favorite video games.
Are you a fan of the Blue Penguins?
I mean, they were kind of a-holes in the video games.
Yeah, did you
Especially
ever
remember that N64 level? Oh,
didn't you race them? Yeah.
yeah. Yeah, and they like
Did
would
you ever
cheat.
kill one? You like throw them off the side of the ledge?
Do you remember that
Yeah,
too?
you could pick them
Yes.
up and
Yep.
toss them. I
Yep.
do remember that. Yeah. Well, as far as Mario goes, I'm down for a new iteration. Obviously, the '93 version didn't age any better than it looked at the time. So,
Yeah.
if anything, it's a great time capsule of just how bad things were for video game movies back in the '90s. But hopefully, this movie delivers. I mean, let's face it, video game movies in general, as a genre, have had a tough go. It's usually not pretty good. So here's to hoping Nintendo can get this right. I have a feeling, based on the fact that there is now like a Nintendo Land in Japan, and there's going to be one at like Universal Studios or something, that Nintendo's hoping maybe to create some sort of MCU shared universe where they can release movies from all their biggest properties. Maybe, maybe not, but that would be my guess, that they're looking to extend their brand. So I'm assuming, just like Iron Man did for the MCU, they really got to get this right, because if you don't, maybe the other movies don't follow. So here's to hoping they get Mario right. That'd be dope.
I mean, I hope so. I would love to see a good Mario movie. That would be a lot of fun.
Oh my God. What would the Avengers be? Super Smash Brothers?
Now that would be pretty epic.
What if they like had the different properties and then they released a Super Smash Brothers where it's like a tournament? Oh my God. I would go to that.
Yeah, it would be pretty sweet. It would be pretty sweet.
I'm very excited now. That's amazing. I don't even know if that's in the plan, but I hope so.
Obviously, it's still Halloween. The season's not over. So I thought this was a good time for a little bit of your favorite segment, Total Rewind.
Ooh.
Where we take a look at movies from 30 years ago and see if they still hold up today. That was your intro. I stole it from you. I'm sorry. I hope I did it justice.
You did. It was good.
And I want to talk about, one of my favorite movies. It was on your list. It was on my list. It was on a bunch of our listeners' lists. John Carpenter's Halloween.
All right. Well, we talked a little bit about it last week, but there's a lot here in terms of the genre that it actually expands, the teen slasher flick. Yep. There's so many tropes that come out of this. The babysitter, having the mysterious, big monster coming, down, I guess what we would consider to be like regular hallways, versus I think older horror movies tend to put teens in scary places.
Mm-hmm.
In Halloween, he's in a very familiar place. He's in your house.
He's in suburbia. Yep.
Yeah. He also is born of suburbia. He is not a demonic. I mean, I guess later maybe, I don't know.
But in this one, he's just a serial killer.
Yeah, right. He's kind of not like a demonic monster or like something, a vampire or zombie or something. He's like a guy, that has like a really twisted, mental hospital past. And there's so much here that they just nail. I'll throw it over to you. What do you think? Is there anything that doesn't hold up in your opinion? Or that aged poorly?
That's a great question. I mean, considering that we've seen so many sequels and even almost, I guess one official reboot and one sort of pseudo sequel reboot of Halloween, it really blows my mind in the sense that I think that this movie still is the best look at it. And I think part of the reason why is
Mm,
John Carpenter doesn't make a movie based around gore and kind of the horror fanfare, right?
yeah.
It's sort of grounded in reality. When you look at horror films now, it's kind of over the top, gratuitous, blood, gore, violence, and lots of boobies. And people love those things. And that's part of the reason I think why people watch horror movies. And obviously, Carpenter, right there is a little bit of nudity and there is a little bit of blood and gore and violence, but
Yeah.
it's tamed down enough. And what this is really rooted in is he builds the tension slowly. He has the creepy piano keys. It's very Hitchcock in the style of making the movie, right? We see, I mean, there's a good half an hour of Michael Myers stalking Jamie Lee Curtis, and we don't really know why he's stalking her. He just is.
So creepy though when you see him and then he's gone, or she
Like
thinks he sees him, and
yeah, like the scene in where he's standing out in the laundry, or I mean, one of my favorite scenes in the movie is when he follows the kid at the school, and we don't even see Michael Myers' face. He's just at the edge of the frame, cut off at the shoulders, and he's walking in parallel as the kid's
oh
walking
man,
across the
it's giving
schoolyard,
me
and the
chills
music.
right now.
It's so good, and you're like, Craven's just setting it up, or I'm sorry, Carpenter's just setting us up, and he's saying, "Look, this is bad." And then he lives in those scenes for enough time for an audience to get uncomfortable. Again, as you said, he sets it in the house. So when Michael is murdering people and harassing people and chasing Jamie Lee Curtis, it's very realistic and grounded in that realism because, she's hiding in closets and she's trying to lock, doors, and everyone can relate to that.
Yeah, right. I mean, it does make you think almost like, here at your own house, you're like, if somebody was coming in, would you stand and fight? Would you have a place you're going to hide? Especially, there is, the age of the people who this is happening to, right? They're young.
Mm-hmm.
Um, what would you do? And it kind of makes your own house feel very creepy because you're like, God, what if there was someone in there right now and they just like busted out?
And I think that was probably part of his reasoning in setting it in suburbia, right? Um, as you pointed out, most of the horror movies are at weird locations or
Yeah, Texas
graveyards, or
Chainsaw.
yeah,
Yeah.
and this is happening anywhere, everywhere, middle America, on a street that could be yours, you know.
Yeah.
And I think that's genius. On top of it, I think adding the character of the psychologist Loomis grounds it in an element of realism in the sense that Michael Myers is one of the few characters who he's mysterious, and at times he has this superhuman strength where he's indestructible virtually. But there is a backstory. And as you said, his birth is on Halloween Eve. And I think that that's really amazing because we know who he is. We know why he kills. Most other movie monsters are kind of faceless and
Yeah, they're just
motiveless, and it kind of works. It's a bit of a stretch at times, but I think it kind of works.
yeah. I know last week we mentioned obviously the score is
Mm-hmm.
still to this day classic Halloween score you should hear at any party you go to, anywhere that obviously is able to play it without violating any sort of rights or anything.
You should set it as your ringtone during October.
Yeah, it's amazing. So I'm sure it'll pop up on social media and people will be playing it, very creepy. And the character itself, Michael Myers, I mean, obviously the mask is iconic still. There's how many horror movie villains have come and gone throughout the years, but how many of the masks or monster faces survive all of the new characters that come and go, and that's one of them.
Yep.
He still shows up. And if you ever, I literally see videos on social media where people dress up as Michael Myers and they pop out, or they're standing somewhere and then people notice them and they like freak out. He's
Yeah.
still got it.
Yeah.
So I know in terms of the overall franchise of Halloween, obviously it's gone all over the place, from sequels to like pseudo sequels to reboots to second reboots to apparently Jamie Lee Curtis is back and this is the last one.
Yeah.
It's gone all over the place. But you do even have to give credit to Jamie Lee Curtis for the original portrayal of the babysitter, because you are like her, you're very frightened with her. So, to her credit, she does a good job of definitely, taking the viewer on that journey. And it works.
Yeah.
I can't think of anything that really doesn't work. Like you said, there maybe Michael Myers is maybe a bit too indestructible. Him being like a mental patient.
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't know if that's how that would be handled in today's society.
I mean, I think maybe the only plot hole is the fact that somehow he learns how to drive. And the psychologist himself points that out in the movie. Like, how did he learn how to drive? But I mean, for the most part, the plot works. I think maybe the only complaint that you could have is that as audiences now, and obviously when this movie came out in 78, it was incredibly popular. It's one of, like, I think it's considered like the most successful independent film of all time. It's
I think that goes to Paranormal Activity now.
I think you're right. Okay.
I think it actually went to Blair Witch Project, and then I think it went to Paranormal. But at the time, I believe you are correct. It was in its time.
And it's, inspired a generate, tons and tons of ripoffs and copies, and it reinvigorated interest in this type of genre. And I think it's amazing. Well, I don't even think it reinvigorated. I think it created this type of genre, and that's a hill I'll die on. And when you look at
horror fans,
and when you look at this movie, I think the only complaint is that because we've seen so much of it, maybe if you've never seen this movie and you're just now getting around to it, it might feel, a little formulaic, because cinema has been so oversaturated with this style of movie for the last 30 plus years.
What year did this come out?
78.
I mean, is Terminator just a sci-fi version of Halloween?
Ooh, now that's a very, kind of, in some ways.
Like the first one, instead of a babysitter, it's a waitress, but like it's like an action sci-fi version of Halloween. Really?
Fair enough. I didn't think about that, but I think you're right. It is.
Well, I mean, I figured it's at least worth mentioning. So I guess if to any of our listeners, if you guys, agree with that assessment, let me know. I mean, if you've listened to this show, that we love Terminator 2. So we love Terminator 1 and 2, but as well. And
we just love all the Terminators.
Yeah. But, I guess in a lot of ways, like the big imposing, kind of faceless man. I mean, Arnold's as the Terminator, he's not wearing emotions.
True.
Although, yeah, he does have guns. That's way cooler, I think.
And she also has someone to protect her from, the Terminator, whereas Jamie Lee Curtis is all on her own, man.
Psychiatrist or bust. So, all right. I mean, in terms of Total Rewind, taking a look at Halloween, I have to say that absolutely it still holds up. I think even having watched a ton of horror movies since its arrival, you can still say definitively that the scares, the tropes, all the things that it helped, contribute to in future generations of films still work really well. Because sometimes that's not the case. Sometimes the first movie introduces these things and other people take it and they do it better. And then you come back to the original and you're like, it's not as good, Here, I think they nailed it.
No, I totally agree. I think this movie still stands up, 30 plus years later, still a great movie, a great thriller, and you got to add it to your Halloween repertoire. I mean, it's called Halloween. What's more Halloween than that?
Yeah, right. Well, I guess they tried to do that with that new movie Trick or Treat, and from like the 2010s or whatever. But
terrible.
I never saw it, so I'm not going to judge until I get
don't watch it. It's not very good.
Okay.
Another bad one is there's a movie they came out with that was a kid's version of Trick or Treat, and it was called Fun Size. And first of all, Fun Size candy sucks, so why would we make a movie about them?
Yeah, who
And
doesn't want to go to the house that's handing out the full size candy bars, right?
yeah, well, okay. So last thing I wanted to run by you. Speaking of going to the house handing out full size candy bars, in your mind, what do you think? And just give me three because we could be here all night. Give me the three movies that you think best depict trick or treating.
Okay, so these are my favorites. Now, the third one on my list, number three, is Hubie Halloween. Now, if you watch this movie, it's actually a movie that takes place at many different Halloween locations. So that range from a Halloween party to like a haunted house to, I don't know, they have, and then trick or treat. So they have a bunch of different Halloween locations, but I think they get the color palette right. Obviously, they get a lot of the aesthetic right for Halloween. And the famous scene, I guess, from that movie is after all the dust has been settled. Spoiler alert if you haven't seen it. Uh, you know, the next year things worked out and he takes his kids trick or treating. So it looks, kind of exactly like you'd think. But number two on my list, we've talked about this now a couple times, is going to be Charlie Brown and the Great Pumpkin.
Yeah.
So animated version of trick or treating, but I have to say, is it Charlie Brown keeps getting rocks?
Yeah, he keeps getting rocks and everyone else gets candy.
I mean, that's so Charlie Brown. And obviously I love like the Great Pumpkin, but they do go, door to door and they make it pretty fun in Charlie Brown. But number one for me is always the scene in E.T. So E.T. the extraterrestrial. And that's because, first of all, Yoda shows up and they actually do a riff on Yoda's Empire Strikes Back theme, which is amazing. So, and
so
it's,
you slipped another Star Wars reference into this podcast.
yeah. So love that. But more than anything, unlike, the first two movies on my list where the trick or treating is more of a montage or more of a scene than it is an integral like part of the story, it sets the scene, I guess, for the night that they're having. But it's not necessarily like if you remove trick or treating, the story couldn't happen, right? In E.T., it is built right into the story. They are using Halloween as cover to go set up and be able to see if they can make contact with ET's family. And Halloween and trick or treating, particularly, become an integral part of that story. And for that reason, I think it's number one on my list.
Fair enough. Good list. Number three for me, I'm going to go with Hocus Pocus from 93. Kind of is the beginning part of the story. I think it's an important part in showing the dynamic between, our characters when an older brother has to take his sister trick or treating. And I thought it kind of, it's sort of a fun look at it.
Oh, it totally is.
Yeah.
It is. There's a nostalgic element to it, and it totally, like it showed up earlier. We did shout outs, and it was on almost most of the lists. I think it totally does work.
Yeah, it's got 90s Halloween, right? They get it down. Number two for me is actually 1999's Big Daddy.
That's a good pick right there.
Because it's funny, right? He goes in and the guy's like throwing Life cereal and CDs into his thing. And like, again, I just think that that's such a funny look at trick-or-treating in general, how he breaks into the guy's house and he's like, dude, you're just going to stiff a kid? This is his first time trick-or-treating. Hilarious. I laugh about it every time I watch it. I think it's a great scene. And then obviously, I got to agree with you. E.T. does it the best. And I mean, you talked about the story, justification for it. But for me, what I love about E.T. is it's one of the few movies I felt that really captured what trick-or-treating used to be like when we were kids.
Yeah, you bring pillowcases and
and it's just people everywhere, right? And I feel like, when I take kids trick-or-treating now, it doesn't seem like it's quite as inundated with trick-or-treaters. And I always thought that was a really cool portrayal that Spielberg was able to capture in the movie.
Yeah, trick-or-treating is interesting because growing up in the Midwest, it really was like a neighborhood thing. Mm-hmm. And I feel like out here, I'm in LA area, what I find a lot of is that there's areas that people bring their kids to. They do those trunk or treats, or there's like a specific block that essentially like hosts the trick-or-treating and everybody goes there versus like, I just went to my neighbors.
Yeah.
If their
All right.
lights weren't on, then you just skip that house.
You just kept walking. Yeah.
Yeah. Or if you're a real jerk, you throw things at it. But, it was just your neighborhood. It wasn't like there was some place that we always went in order, for instance, here in LA, I used to live in Pomona and I tried to hand out candy just outside my apartment. It was a bad idea. Like nobody wanted to come up, I mean, granted, if you know anything about Pomona, but it was like nobody wanted to take candy from like this guy. And I was dressed like a Jedi, which was pretty cool. So I would just ignite my lightsaber. And then some kid confused me with Jesus because I had long hair at the time. Yeah. So
because you were wearing the cloak and he thought you were just as Jesus.
Yeah. I hadn't ignited the saber yet, so he didn't know. And I was like, "Oh, I'm a Jedi." And then he was like, "Oh, that's cool." But I did want to give one kind of honorable mention to. It's not a movie. Now, granted, I had mentioned last week Stranger Things season 2. They do a trick-or-treating scene, which is great. But did you ever see the Halloween episode from Pete and Pete?
I'm sure I did.
It was like an old Nickelodeon show.
I mean, I remember the show.
90s.
I can't specifically remember the episode. What is it?
Oh no, they do a whole Halloween night where like the older kids come and steal the younger kids' candy and like they do all this stuff. But like I don't know, that to me always seemed a lot like how Halloween was. It was kind of a fun night, Halloween, or at least whatever night trick-or-treating was, where as kids, like we got to go out kind of unsupervised. And in the Midwest, I mean, we would do this all the time, but not interacting with everybody. You'd ride your bikes and go to, your fort in the woods or somewhere, it was always just you guys. But Halloween night, because like you said, there were so many people out, it was like a lot of fun.
Yeah. Yeah. No, dude, I got to check out that episode because that sounds like a nice trip down memory lane.
And trick-or-treating is just one of those things, like, I don't know, you can't do it as an adult. Like, you can fake it, but it's never what it is when you were a kid.
Yeah.
It's like the best.
Dude, that's the truth, man.
Anyway, all these movies and all these trick-or-treating scenes getting me nostalgic over here. That does it for our episode this week. So again, want to thank everybody for tuning in. Thank you guys so much for sharing your comments and your lists. Be sure to continue the conversations and send your comments and feedback on this week's episode. There were a few facts that we mentioned throughout. If you're, a cinephile or you just happen to know the answer and CP and I are wrong, feel free to correct us. Also, CP does love it when you guys agree with them. I hate it. So keep that dynamic going. But if you would like to continue the conversations or have not yet subscribed to the show, you can find all of our links and all the information at filmmakerscompass.com. I am at Big Kid D-Man and CP.
I am at IndieCow5.
So be sure to follow the show, Film Comp Podcast, and leave us a 5-star review if you haven't already. That actually, it just gives us a little bit more feedback about the show overall, as well as helps us rank a little bit higher in the podcast directory. So we always appreciate that. But all feedback and all comments welcome. We love hearing from you guys. So thank you so much. Hope you enjoyed this week's episode, and we will be back next week with a brand new show.
See you then.